Okay, cool.
We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully your day is going well. We've got kind of a departure of a show today. We'll probably talk about some politics. I have a feeling that's what drew this guest into it originally, but we have some common ground in the music business. His name is Lars, and he's from South Minneapolis, the place I was born and raised. So we have that in common, Lars.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, great place to be. Great place to be from.
And tell me about you. You and I kind of connected on something other than politics. Tell us about what you do and kind of your background.
I'm a musician in South Minneapolis. So I grew up in a very artistic household. My mom is a visual artist. My dad is a choir teacher. So music and art was always held to great high regard in my house. And so that was always around as a kid. And I first got into music through my dad's vinyl collection and just rummaging through what he had, old Motown and Beatles and Stevie Wonder and Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones and all that kind of stuff. And then you kind of, when you started making your own money, like I think I was 10 when I had my first paper out, and started putting all that money towards buying tapes and albums and, further on CDs and things like that. So a pretty vast music collection. And so that's informed a lot of what I do. I've, played in original band stuff I've written, had over half dozen recorded releases, got to open up for George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelic and
Wow,
the Wailers and Wyclef Jean, Tantric, some bigger names. So yeah.
So
have interesting stories of the journey and touring and stuff like that. So
we'll talk about some of those. Now you're I presume you're a player of an instrument and a singer both.
Yeah, I sing. I play some percussion. I don't know if I do any of them well other than sing, but yeah, sing is being the front man is my primary vocation, I would say. So
okay, gotcha. You're the front man. That's where everybody wants to be. They
yeah.
want to be quarterback of the football team, and they want to be the
Right,
front man
right.
of a rock band. What kind of places are you playing when you're playing around? What kind of
I played a
venues?
bunch of places. I mean, usually our primary places to play are college towns. That usually seems to be where more of the money's at. A lot of the stuff in town, honestly, around Minneapolis, St. Paul, doesn't pay very well unless you're big, unless you're a very established name. Then then it's got some money to it. But around town, like 7th Street Entry, Fine Line. I used to love the old Uptown Bar. That was one of my faves, and just broke my heart when they leveled that for an Apple store. I mean, just
Yeah.
hit me right in the heart, because it was just such a cool venue. It had such a vibe to it, and I don't think you can discount how important it is to have places that are friendly to local music and really treat their artists well. You wish that would go hand in hand more, but it just doesn't.
And what kind of music do you play? What's your genre?
It's like original bluesy rock stuff mostly. I mean,
Okay.
I did my former band I was in was kind of a funk reggae thing with horns, and it was a 10-piece. And the current band I have now is like a 4-piece. And
Oh,
I've
okay.
done like some solo work, like some kind of I put out recently a single for my new record that was stuff I did during COVID. That because of the isolation and things like that, I started messing around with beats on my iPad and electronic loops and samples and stuff. And that was fun because it really took me out of how I'm used to writing. I'm used to writing with the band, and suddenly having to come up with all the instrumentation myself really put a new challenge for me. And yeah, I really dug it. I liked the challenge of it. And it took me to some places I hadn't gone before vocally. So that was a lot of fun.
I presume that there's a place online where people can access your music and give a listen to hear what you sound like and hear your
Yeah.
music, other
Yep.
than just hearing you on the show
Yep.
here. Where would that be?
Yep. iTunes, YouTube. You just look up Lars Nelson. You should be able to find. We had a episode of Backroads for PBS that they've shown here in town on Channel 2 a handful of times. So you can easily find that on YouTube, and yeah,
Okay.
get a kind of a feel of what we do.
Now, the obvious,
Spotify and even streaming services, although I'm hesitant to give them a lot of play, because the residual rate on the streaming service is just so pitiful. I mean, you know, fractions of a cent. I mean, it's really, it's thievery. I mean, it's really what it is.
It is. I think that's the common thought, whether you be a smaller musician or even the bigger ones are annoyed by that. And, you know, that's the one thing I found out about I was in the music business for a short time, and excuse me for saying so, but the business side of music is the most cutthroat, fucked up business I've ever been in. Could you support me on that? It is. It's fucking horrible. These people aren't good people. The ones I dealt with in the record
without
business.
question, without question.
Well, let me ask you this: as a musician, front man from South Minneapolis, how is it you happen upon what we're doing with the Rational Boomer stuff? How did you connect up with that?
I think it was I'm trying to remember, through a friend of mine had followed your stuff and then kind of hit me to it, and I was like, oh, that's you know, I really dug it. It was a fresh voice as far as what I had been hearing, and I like that you just kind of cut through a lot of bullshit. And you know, I can always appreciate that when someone's a true voice, even if it's not necessarily. I mean, in your case, I agree with a lot of what you say. There are some people that even when I don't agree with a lot of what they say, if they're at least true to it, they give you a decent argument of here's why I believe it. I could take that a lot over someone that's just following a trend or just trying to go after whatever the newest twist in sociology is.
Well, you know, that's one of the things that I try to tell people. I get people come into me and say they want to do a podcast, and my background is in radio, and they have this plan of how to do the podcast, and they want to emulate radio, and all you're doing is an imitation of somebody else. And I said, you know, podcasting's more close up, more and it shouldn't sound like a radio show. It should sound like a conversation like you and I are having now. But I think anytime somebody's being authentic and not trying to glitz it up or produce the shit out of it, you get a better response. I'm assuming you get the same thing with the music. You don't have all the fancy stuff that some of the big acts do, but you're probably better received because of the rawness or because of the authenticity.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think you can tell. I mean, there's always that in the music industry to a certain degree, is people trend chasing, you know what I mean? Where this is the newest whatever in rock and roll or R&B or whatever genre you're talking about. Suddenly this gets big and everybody's like, well, let's try to do a song in that, you know, in that vein. I mean, to better or to worse, I mean, like in the end of the 70s, you saw a lot of that with rock and roll, that suddenly everybody had their disco song. You know, the Stones put out their disco song, Kiss put out their disco song. You know what I mean? Everybody was trying to kind of interpolate that into their own styles.
Well, and it's kind of foisted upon these artists by the record industry. At least it was at the time. Like when I got into the music business, it was in the 80s in Minneapolis. So it was the time of the rise of Prince, the time, all the R&B and kind of funk bands that were in town. And of course, you know, you've got Husker Du and Replacements too. So this was kind of a hotbed in Minneapolis when it all hit. And I represented some artists, and it was frequent at the time because Prince was so hot. Everybody wanted a carbon copy of Prince, which was a stupid idea. You can't get a carbon copy of Prince. He was the full package. He had the talent, he had the mindset, and he had the look. And very few people could put all those things together. So they would come out, and, you know, I represented a guy who played in the group at the time, who was extremely talented, could play every instrument, had a great voice, produced his own shit, but he was kind of a big huskier guy, not fat, but he was a big manly looking man. And they were looking more for the thin androgynous kind of guy. So he never made it past a certain point, but they would sit down and say, can you write something like 1999? Well, of course he can, but why would you?
Right. No, that's very true. I mean, I've told people too, I often get that you're playing gigs or you're out and about, people know what you do, you're a musician, and I've always wanted to start a band. And I always tell people, do it. Like, I can't play anything. I'm like, unfortunately, that doesn't matter as much as you think.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, so much of it is attitude. I've seen bands that really technically weren't anything. They were really not impressive, but they brought something from a showmanship standpoint. They gave you some performance that you're like, wow, they're really good. And if you stop and listen to it later, you'd be like, that's not that good. But technically, you know, it is not nearly as important as what you're bringing to the stage, how you're coming across. I always tell people like, oh, I can't play an instrument. Well, you'll learn. There's a lot of like, you know, like some of the early punk bands, those first album or two, they couldn't play. It was pretty obvious. Everything they're playing is pretty primitive. However, they grew into their instrument. You go 3-4 albums in, they go, oh, now this is really musical. Now they're starting to figure out how their instrument works. How song structure, you know, comes about.
Even though I was in that era, I was in my late teens and the late 70s.
Right.
Excuse me. I never got punk rock. I mean, I you know, sue me, but I like a little melody in my song. I like a nice voice in my song. When I was in the 60s, my greatest, the musician I was most interested in was Elvis Presley. Now, he had his heyday in the 50s before I was born. But you have to understand, when you're a little kid and you're 6 or 7 years old, you get to watch the movies on TV that he was in. Here's this cool looking guy. He wins every fight. He wins every race. He kicks everybody's ass, and he gets the hot chick. That's who I want to fucking be. And then, of course, he's got a great voice. I love the music.
Absolutely.
And it's like you said, it's more, and that's what I found in the record business. The persona was equal to whatever talent the person had. Because there are a lot of people who have good gimmicks or good looks and less talent. They'll get the record deal before somebody with no looks and great talent.
Yeah.
You're selling something here.
I've seen that more times that I can mention. Yeah, absolutely. It's the music business, you know, business being the operative term.
And if anybody wants,
I've seen some artists too. And I think it's more unfair on, quite honestly, female artists, because there's definitely a higher threshold of, you have to be attractive. I don't think men have nearly that threshold that they have to overcome. No. There's some guys that are really not good looking people, but hey, they're good musicians. That carries them. The women have so much more that they have to push through to get somewhere if they're not traditionally attractive.
Yeah. Tell me how Rick Ocasek gets Paula that supermodel if he doesn't play fucking guitar and have a hit. If he doesn't have a hit, that motherfucker isn't going to even get to talk to her.
Right.
But
absolutely. Well, no, it's interesting what you're saying about Elvis. I mean, I remember when my brother and I were kids, we had to be probably still in our single digits, and we saw King Creole.
Oh, cool.
His movie. It's just fantastic. Like it's exactly what you're saying. It's that attitude that he has on screen. And we weren't like Elvis fans going into it. And we knew, you know, some peripheral songs. We knew, you know, Jailhouse Rock and, you know, Heartbreak Hotel and all that kind of stuff. But like just seeing him on screen, he has that presence on screen. He has that look. And we're just like, this is like the coolest guy. You know what I mean? Just like his attitude. And you're like, yeah, how would you not be a fan of this guy? He just got this real swagger to him. And just, you can't fake, you know?
Well, and that's the thing, and we can tie it into politics too, because it's very similar in politics. Donald Trump is a perfect illustration of attitude over substance. The guy is dumb as a fucking rock.
Yeah,
he's emotionally flawed,
right.
But he had the courage to speak out and say shit that nobody would say, and that resonated with some people. Dumb fucking people, but people nonetheless. Right. And that's what got the ball rolling. And then when he had this shit show that he was carrying with him everywhere, the media comes up, picks him up and say, hey, this is good TV. We don't believe anything he says, but we'll get some ratings with it. They throw him on, and after a period of time, he gets legitimacy. This is how somebody with the right attitude gets traction, even though he's got nothing to offer.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think there's it's definitely become more common now in the last 20 some years of the less track record you have as a politician, the better.
Yeah.
I mean, that I think Biden is like an exception to this rule, because so often now it's like we want you have to have voted for less bills, have been involved with less political things. If you're a novice, people are like, oh yeah, let's go with that person because they don't have, we don't know much about them. The more people get to know any political candidate, usually they're more turned off by it and they're less likely to vote for them further. But
Well, and that's the thing, there are some red flags there that you would imagine politicians would recognize. They vote for Donald Trump because he's not one of the establishment. They voted for Jesse Ventura as governor of Minnesota because he wasn't part of the establishment. They pushed Hillary away because she was part of the establishment. If you're a thinking man, you might say, they don't like this establishment shit. Maybe we should just reimagine who our politicians are, make them experienced, but don't make them the same old cookie cutter shit that we've had for 60 years. You would think the parties would recognize that. And Donald Trump was a perfect example of it. He had no business being president. He was originally thought to be a joke, but then he was given credibility by the media and then all the people jumping on board. Oh, he's going to be my Elvis. He's going to save me. He's going to get me the girls. He's going to let me say whatever I want to say. And it resonated with people.
Yeah. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, don't you think that's a huge part of it that we see in all kinds of avenues of culture, but specifically with the Trump thing, the sense of belonging to something.
Yeah.
I think there's so many of those people that I belong to MAGA. The hat is my get through the door. Hey, I have something in common with these people. I think it shows something about a loneliness or an isolation in our culture, that they need this to kind of have a common currency with other people.
Well, I think there are people like the Trump fans that are maybe middle to lower income. They're the people we talk to all the time that tell us, oh, the government's out to get us. I can't catch a break. I'm going to do this. This is going to happen. So when one guy comes along and says, I'm tired of that shit too, I'm going to fight for you, even though he doesn't mean it, you get behind that because you feel like it's your only fucking option. Finally, somebody's helping me.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And then he doesn't. And he disappoints them, and they still follow him. It's ironic. I mean, don't you find politics?
Yeah, that's the baffling thing.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, don't you?
No, that's the baffling thing, is that so many broken promises, and it doesn't shake them at all. They're still absolutely resolute. This is a great guy. This is somebody that's for somebody like me.
Yeah. Well, it reminded about politics these days. It's not what it once was. Journalism isn't what it once was. Journalism was Walter Cronkite, nothing but the facts. You make your own decision. Politics were pretty dry. They deal with policies and stuff. Now it seems like, and it should be interesting for somebody who's a performer, everything is performative. There is no substance. It's just all who can put on the best song and dance. And that's where we're falling short in politics, the media. They're doing plays that aren't real, or they're singing songs to a track show. It's not real.
Right. Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. That's why I was kind of fascinated by John Fetterman. Just when he came on the scene, I was like, wow, this is somebody that's, say what you will, is just a genuine character. I mean, the shorts and the baggy sweatshirts, and just like he looked like a real guy. And I think that was really appealing to certainly the people in Pennsylvania. It's just a really kind of a fascinating character, and tattooing the dates of like mass murders in his district. And I mean, some of that stuff is a really fascinating case. It's somebody you at least are intrigued to kind of want to know better.
Fetterman's an interesting case, and I'm all for the average guy becoming a senator. And I was for him when he was running, but when he got in and he had the emotional shit and he was kind of tucked away for a while, it kind of annoyed me, because I'm thinking to myself, if you're going to be a senator, you better be prepared to do the job all day, every day. And I'm not saying he can't, but when he was out of the picture for a while, it kind of frustrated me because this isn't new to him. This is part of who he is.
Yeah.
And he knows how to, it just bothered me a little bit. I do like Fetterman. I think he's a good guy to have in there,
Yeah.
but we've got to be,
Right.
it's kind of along the same lines of Biden. I love Biden. He's done a good job, but there's something troubling about it because he's going to be 82 in 24. And we know,
Right.
you can keel over and die at 82 and it's no surprise to anybody. And we're not in a position where we need that
especially when the average, right. Well, especially when the average male in the US lives to 77, you know, like you kind of feel like it's on borrowed time. And for both candidates, I mean, Trump's 3 years behind Biden. It's not like he's some spring chicken, you know.
And he's far less healthy than Joe Biden at this point. So forgive me for asking, but I tend to be blunt. How old a guy are you?
47.
47. Okay. Now, have you been in
I don't look a day over 48.
No, you don't. You don't. And I don't look a day over 70, even though I'm 63. But so I know some people in the music business in Minnesota, and they never went on to have the stardom or the hit records or anything, but they're doing pretty well in this town. People like the Johnny Home Band or Mick Sterling. These guys have created a fan base and do make pretty good money at it. But what I do know about musicians is that it is a struggle, because not only you got to find the jobs, you got to travel, you got to do all this shit, and then you got to get people who will pay you, and then you got to get people who will actually come through and pay you and not try to fuck you over. That's not an easy lifestyle for a guy who's approaching 50. How are you dealing with that?
Right. Very carefully. I mean, I have my girl is very supportive of me. My family's very supportive of me. So I mean, I think that's a big thing. But I've always been driven by creative pursuits. Being, fantastically wealthy, although I'm sure would ease some problems, it's never been, I've never been overly concerned with it. As long as I'm comfortable, I have a roof over my head, I can eat. I don't get overly concerned with other things. I think you can, leaning back to how things can be contrived with music, I think if you're trying to, hey, I'm going to get rich with this next song, you're going to write something really shitty. It's just like, it's going to sound contrived. It's going to sound forced. And I don't want to do that to myself. I don't want to do that to my psyche. So
I can understand that completely. I think I can relate to you on this stuff. When I started doing the TikToks, everybody said, yeah, don't do TikToks. You're too fucking old. That's not going to work.
Right.
And I said, well, I think I can do it, but I'm going to make this an experiment. I'm not going to do anything fancy. I'm not going to edit shit. I'm not going to lip sync stuff. I'm not going to go with trends. I'm going to be this old big dumb white guy sitting in his living room spewing his shit. And if the shit I say resonates, then I win. Because, if I'm trying to do something I'm not, which I've tried to do in the past, radio stations ask me to do different things. It never works. It just ends up being worse. So I said, fuck it. I got nothing to lose. I got a pension. I got other monies from investments coming in. I'm not doing this to keep the lights on. So now I have that one chance to do what everybody wants to do, is do whatever you want, not worry about money. I had the opportunity. I said, well, I got to fucking try it. I got to try it. But somebody in the music business takes a bigger risk. I'm taking no risk here other than embarrassing myself. I've been doing that all my fucking life. So that's no problem. But every day is kind of a risk for musicians. I've worked with a lot of musicians, and I'll be honest with you, Lars, I have a lot of musicians that are friends. But I have a lot of musicians I've known over the years when I have my studio and stuff. Immature, irresponsible fucking babies. I was a babysitter half the time. Now, I'm not suggesting you're like that, because clearly you're not, but you've had to deal with those people too.
Absolutely. Well, and you'll find this too, is you play enough bands over the years, you'll find people that, for me, music is always a release. I always figure it as my journal, my diary, what have you. I can purge some things in my life and have them out. And I always tell people it keeps me off the psychiatrist couch. Not that there's anything wrong with going to a psychiatrist or whatever, but it's really, I think, saved me money over the years, because it's like some of these experiences, and sometimes you don't know exactly when you're writing something what it means. You're like, oh, these are just words that go together, and this has a nice rhyme scheme, or this has, a certain cadence to it that you like. And then you can, put it away, look at it a couple of months later and you go, oh my God, it's so obvious what I was going through here. And I wrote it all down. And I like having that outlet. I mean, I think it's super important to have, and I think for most people, not just musicians, I think it's nice to have an outlet where you can go with your thoughts and not have to care. I think a lot of people carry so much thought and weight around, and I think this kind of purges me of it. And it's fun for me when I can write a song and people relate to it, and I go, well, this is a very personal experience for me, but you found something in it that means something to you. So I try never to like over explain a song to people. You know what I mean? They'll be like, what is this song about? And I might give you a vague outline, but I don't ever want to get into like super specifics, because it's like, if it means something meaningful to you and it's not what I intended, I want it still to be meaningful to you. I think sometimes people dress creativity with so many different, lights and whistles, and then it's like it takes away some of what's valuable about it. Like, case in point, like I'm a big fan of David Lynch's filmmaking, not because I always understand it, and some of it's really abstract, but I like that he keeps all these abstractions in his films. He puts a lot of things up for your interpretation, things that you're like, wow, I don't know what that's about. I might have to watch that again. And he really savors that, the keeping it kind of obtuse at times, where, yeah, what in the hell is that about? I think that's cool, because I think so much of media and art is spoon-fed to you now. Right. All right, here's the part where you have to cry. Here's the part where it's supposed to make you happy. Here's the part you're supposed to laugh. And I like stuff that's pulled away a little bit and go, hey, I'm going to leave it up to the viewer, the listener. You take it how you want to take it.
Right. Well, like I have the similar situation. It's very cathartic to be able to sit down and either sing or say whatever you want. Because there's so many people in this country. I've said this before about people that follow me. I said, I believe sometimes I'm the only one that has the First Amendment right, because everybody else has to address a boss, a family member, a wife, a husband, kids. They've got to couch what they say. Yeah. So there's a certain amount of freedom in what I do, because I don't give a fuck. I don't work for anybody, and anybody in my family knows better than to tell me to not do something. But it's got to be, like you say, it's a release for you. I wish I had the talent to be musical. I did write lyrics for a song one time, but that's all I can do. Yeah. And I wasn't necessarily good at it. But to be able to sit in front of a crowd like you do and kind of spill your guts through your music, that does have to be pretty cathartic.
It's wonderful, and it's fun. Like, if it doesn't necessarily have to be something you're purging. There can be experiences I've had that are just really joyful and blissful, and I like returning there. You kind of put yourself in a mindset when you perform, and returning to like really nice experiences. It's a really good feeling, because you can get some of that rush, some of that tingle on your arm, the little jiggle up your back. However it comes to you. That's such a cool thing to return to, where you go, oh, what a great experience. And it's become this other entity, which I can enjoy performing and other people can enjoy listening to. It's odd. It's really hard to rate anything better.
And there's a huge difference. I'm sure you experience it more than I do, but there's a huge difference between doing what we're doing here, or doing a podcast or doing a radio show, as opposed to standing in front of a crowd. And most people hate talking in front of crowds. I love it because I get a response, and then I know where to go with it. It doesn't make me nervous. And that's got to be a very gratifying thing for you, to go up there, play a song, have people clap, love it, ask you questions, buy a CD, whatever they do. That's sometimes more valuable than money.
Right. No, absolutely. Absolutely. That's, if you can make someone's day, or, I remember when I put my first CD out in college, and a girl came up to me after a show, and she's like, Silver Chain was a song I wrote called Silver Chain. She's like, that was the theme song of my summer. And I'm like, that is
That's
You
cool.
know, it hits you right in the heart because you're like, wow, that's so cool that you took something that I experienced and really for you it has this whole other meaning. And I love the thought that music will travel places I haven't been. You know, I
Right.
can look at like the trends of where stuff music is streaming, and now with streaming services do have their benefits of being able to go out across the world. And I love seeing that, oh, people in Germany are listening to this, people in Spain, people in Ecuador. I mean, it's just really cool that like the internet can bring all these different stripes together. It's cool and fascinating.
Well, maybe we can expand it even further because, like you, with this podcast or the TikToks, I got people in Jamaica, Ireland, Australia. It just amazes me
That's
why
awesome.
anybody in another country would want to listen to my bullshit. They'd probably be more apt to listen to your beautiful music as opposed to this crass,
Right.
foul-mouthed, middle-aged guy talking shit. But for whatever reason,
Right.
they are attracted to it. So when I was in the music business in the 80s and 90s, people have come to me and says, you ever want to do it again? I said, I couldn't do it again because the music business of the 80s and 90s is 180 degrees different than what it is now. I mean, in the 80s and 90s, you'd have
Right.
an artist, you get some pictures, you do a demo, you go to the record company and hope they'll give you a meeting. And if you have some contacts like I did, you'd get into a couple meetings, and then half the time you always get a kick out of watching when American Idol was on and they get so mad at what's his name?
Simon.
Simon, how mean he'd be. Fuck, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Right.
Sit in a record company in Los Angeles and you play this song and they go, that's shitty. That's esoteric. I don't want that fucking bullshit. So,
Yeah.
but nowadays it's not that. I mean, do you feel a certain amount of freedom now that you can essentially almost distribute your own music?
Yeah, I mean there is a freedom to it, and as you said, like that the music system of the 80s and 90s is completely gone. Unfortunately, I think there are some bands that really are still working by that playbook, you know, that they
Yeah.
don't realize that culture is gone. I was in a band some years ago with a guy that really still thought it was the 80s as far as I'm going to send out, you know, we're going to get finished 300 CDs, we're going to send them out to all these record labels. And I said, it doesn't work like that. The labels will get it and throw it directly into the trash. The ones that even would take a listen to it, the person that's going to listen to it is so far down the rung. They're going to have
Yeah.
to make so many steps above them to get to anyone that has any difference of that label. It's a complete pissing away of your money.
Right. You know, I mean, when we were pitching somebody at A&M Records, his name was John McClain. He went on to be president of Interscope and dealing with Michael Jackson's publishing and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But we went in his office and he opened a closet, literally a closet, and he had four rows from top to bottom of nothing but cassette tapes that he never listened to. I mean, I can't
Sure.
relate on that level, but I can tell you this, even with my TikToks, there's a lot of comments. I can't read all the comments. I don't read
Right.
all the comments. I let them talk
Right.
amongst themselves. So the idea of sending
Right.
something off and getting discovered, that wasn't the case then. It isn't the case now. I mean, doesn't it make sense? I've seen people get hit songs by just doing a 2-minute TikTok and having that song
Right.
get viral or catch on. Have you ever done anything like that?
Not TikTok as so much, but yeah, we've done a few videos, and yeah, it's tough to in the environment that is. I think there's so much of media that's so fractured. You kind of wonder sometimes which direction to go in. You know, do you spend a bunch of money to get a really nice looking video and then maybe no one sees it, or you have to kind of get into the right algorithm for it to take off anywhere. So yeah, it's definitely a curious case that I don't think that I or a lot of musicians have solved exactly, you know, because I think it's always mutating and changing. And what is the newest, you know, service that's bringing music to people? I mean, MySpace was the big deal for a handful of years, and then suddenly it's the carnival that's closed. You know, like
Right.
suddenly the rides are still there, but they're not running. You know, like it's I mean, really fascinating how quickly our media consumption can change.
You said you were 47 years old and
Mm-hmm.
your business of music is a going concern.
Yeah.
What are plans for somebody in your position? Is there a goal you're reaching for? Is it just to continue working? Is your age a factor like it was in the 80s? I mean, if you were 22 or less, they didn't
Well,
even
I
want to
mean,
look at you.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm not under some misconception that I'm going to be, on the cover of Teen Beat or something, or
Oh
whatever.
shit, really?
Some
That's a
young
disappointment.
young person's magazine. I think it's a fool's errand. I've seen a lot of middle-aged to older bands that are still trying to chase the 18 to 30 demographic, and I'm like, it's a fool's errand. Play music that you believe in first, and if people around your age or people that are into quality music are into it, cool. That's what it should be about. I think anytime back to the trend chasing, get into trend chasing, it's not going to get you anywhere.
No,
But yeah,
it's
I mean, I continue. I feel like I want to perform the rest of my life until they put me in the ground. I want to be performing somewhere, be it big stage or a coffee shop. I mean, I played for 6,000 people, and I played for 6.
really.
You kind of go through all those steps when you're first starting to play out. You get your Monday slot with you're playing 3 songs, and these are the 3 songs you've worked up, and then okay, you drew well on Monday, now you move to Tuesday, and okay, did you bring some people into it? And you just kind of work your way, and suddenly you do your first weekend slot of, hey, we're the headliner on weekend, we better have a hell of a lot of tunes, or all right, let's hope the audience changes a bit so we can play the same songs 2 hours later, because none of the same people are in the club, and I mean, there's all these kind of different tricks.
So what you're saying is 40 years from now, when you're 87 years old, you want to be the white Mississippi Fred McDowell sitting in a fucking wheelchair,
I'd love
playing your guitar, singing the blues.
I would love it. I saw, I think it was in 2010, Pine Top Perkins, if you know him, is
Yeah.
the old keyboard player for Muddy Waters. He came through and was playing the famous Dave's Blues thing down at PV Plaza, and he was 93 at the time, and he came out and did 45 minutes of fantastic blues, and he was up there and he's singing about all the young ladies he wanted to get. And I was like, now for Pine Top, I mean, what's a young lady? Is that a gal in her mid-70s?
Yeah,
I mean,
no shit.
What's a young gal?
Yeah. Get those young spring chickens of 82. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Well, that's the interesting thing though. And a lot of people of our age, my age, that listen to the podcast, the late 50s, mid 60s people, a lot of us will say the best music was in the 70s. The best music was in the 70s. And that's largely because it was popular when we came of age. But the thing that strikes me about that, when I was a kid in the 70s, there was a revival of the 50s. And those revivals would usually be lower budget shows. It would have the Chuck Berrys and stuff, but they'd be in the lesser venues and people would go to see them and they were fun. The thing that amazes me though, with the 70s acts, these guys are in their 80s, Rolling Stones, Bob Seger, even Mellencamp to a certain extent. They're 100 years old, but they're still playing huge venues and selling tons of tickets at expensive prices. Is that do you think that's due to the era of the music or just the music industry as a whole? I mean, is Justin Bieber going to be doing shows when he's 75? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. I mean, part of it, I think, is just the quality of the songcraft. Like some of the songs the Stones wrote are just such quality tunes front to back. That it keeps being reintroduced to generation after generation. I went to the last time the Stones played in town. I think it was the 4th or 5th time I've seen them, and just the wide range of people that were at that show, and like people that think of the Stones oldies as Bridges to Babylon. There was that, they're like the late 90s album. And then you had other people that have been into them since the early 80s and Tattoo You, and you go back Between the Buttons and so on and so forth. It was cool seeing all the different generational things that they have there. And I mean, I don't think you can also discount kind of along the lines of, how Jimmy Buffett made Margaritaville like this whole culture, right? And the Grateful Dead have the Jerry Bear and the skull and all these like symbols. What I'm wearing, the Stone's tongue, that's
that's classic.
That's symbolism. That's also a pulling of a culture where people see that and they go, oh, it's the Stones, automatically identified. A lot of bands are always trying to find something that draws people in, and they can not even put the band name, but put a symbol, and you go, I know who that is. That's a huge part of the commercial appeal, I think, of the Stones, is having that kind of, fuck you to, whoever comes our way. The bad boys of rock, that's what they initially were, having that kind of counterpoint to what the Beatles were bringing to the party. Although I absolutely love the Beatles, I'm not discounting them at all, but definitely a more abrasive,
more rock and roll.
There's always something.
Beatles were more pop.
There's always something to that, rock, rebellious,
Yeah, exactly. The only thing is, I always loved the Rolling Stones. I was a fan. And I remember when the song, back in the 70s, when the songs came out, Honky Tonk Woman, all that stuff. And the song Brown Sugar, love the song Brown Sugar. Till I'm watching on TikTok and somebody said, have you ever read the lyrics to Brown Sugar? Going, no, I haven't. And then I did. It's about the fucking slave trade and rape, and wow, that would never go today.
Yeah. Right. Well, I think they've discontinued having that in their set, at least recently.
I would hope so.
The last couple tours, they like, this is just too much of a hot button to actually put in our set anymore.
That's going to be a hot button. Well, we're talking to Lars Nelson. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Yeah.
We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. I have the good fortune to have a guest on the show today. His name is Lars Nelson. He is a musician, and he's based in South Minneapolis, my old stomping grounds where I was born and raised. So I'm familiar to where he's at. It's probably a short, different distance from where I grew up. But Lars and I were talking about something before we went back on here, and it's how, this show is mostly about politics, and you're a musician, and I have some music business experience. So that was kind of the tie-in. But you were talking about how music kind of influences politics, and politics kind of influences music, kind of the pop culture of it all. And explain to me what you were talking about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think they're becoming more inextricably linked. I mean, with Bill Clinton coming in, that was kind of like the turning of the like rock and roll culture suddenly into politics. And with Obama coming in, it was suddenly like somebody that grew up on hip hop music is suddenly in the White House. And also, he listens to rock and roll, but he also listens to hip hop, and, whoever's coming out today. I find that kind of fascinating that people, that it continues like that, and we see it with messaging of some of these political candidates, with Trump continuing to try to use certain people's rock songs, and they go, no, we don't want our music associated with that. I don't know if you remember with George W., and he used the Orleans' song Still the One. And the lead singer of that is like, no, you're not using that. And he actually ended up running for Congress off of that, of like, he was starting to get his political motives known, and suddenly they're like, yeah, well, why don't you run? It's like, okay. He won in a district in Louisiana, I believe.
Well, and the thing about it is, if you go back to the 60s, and I know you're a little young for this, but that's a time when politics really affected music, and that music of that era had a big impact on what happened in politics and in history generally. I mean, when you talk about the Vietnam War and the protests, there were protests on campuses, but those songs that Bob Dylan, Buffalo Springfield, all these people did had a significant impact. I mean, it's implanting a vision or an idea in people's minds, and when it becomes something that they like, it does change minds.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you watch one that stands out to me, just political, but just kind of a purging of his soul, was Richie Havens' tune at Woodstock with Freedom. Where he was kind of interpolating Motherless Child and all these other, like, blues and folk anthems, and he put it into the song, and it was like, that's what everybody's feeling, and it's just propulsive, that beat, it's just so cool the way he's able to just have the audience. And that was when he was out of songs. He was coming up with that on the spot, and suddenly that became one of his staples of his live show further on out was the song that came out of really the ether and like all of his influences and all this, you know, pain and anguish. And suddenly it was like, yes, let's rise up. We have this anthem for, you know, our generation.
Do you find in your experiences with either watching other people or yourself that you two come up with some of your best shit when it's just completely extemporaneous, it's just completely off the top of your head, you don't have time to think about it, is something that moves you and you just fucking go?
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes you don't know where it's coming from, but yeah, just oftentimes for me it's like a beat. I'll get some beat in my head, or you know, oh yeah, that works. And then a lot of times melody will just roll on top of it. You don't quite know what influenced it. I had a song that I wrote with my college band that was very much about the hypocrisy of the pro-life movement, that they were against abortion and they're such good folks, but they would shoot abortion doctors. Right. And that was kind of that late 90s era where it's like you clearly are blind to how much of a hypocrite you are for doing that. I wrote kind of playing with that whole hypocrisy of it. It was kind of a powerful song.
Well, and you know, it seems like hypocrisy is something that's running rampant right now amongst the Republican Party. It's absolutely ridiculous. Right. I think, you know, like what I do with the Rational Boomer podcast, I think some music is exactly the same in the sense they hear a message and it's said in such a beautiful melodical way that they go, yeah, I'm on board with that. And it becomes their own like personal anthem, and it becomes their thought process because they hadn't thought about doing it that way or saying it that way. That's how incredibly powerful media in general. Most media is just kind of cut and paste and cookie cutter shit. It's when you get people like yourself that come out and do something original, and it's truly the first time anybody's heard it, that has such a huge impact. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, or I love leaving a live show inspired to write. You know, like that's one of my favorite things. Suddenly, you know, in a break between bands, I'll have like an idea where it's just like, I've been seeing this great performance in someone I've never seen before, or bands I have seen before, but just really feeling an energy of, we come from all these different walks of life, everybody in the audience, but we have this common currency of, we all love this music for whatever reason, for our political differences, our social differences, our, you know, whatever. We all come together under this umbrella of this music speaks to us in whatever way. And then there's all, you know, the offshoots of, but this music speaks heavier to this section of the audience. And this is more, you know, meaningful to this, or this music got you through a breakup, or having your heart broken, or, you know, and any number of things. I think it's so cool how the same band can have various fans that their music speaks in wildly different ways.
Right. Well, have you noticed that at all? I mean, I read a story recently. There's a young woman who's a country artist. I think her name was, what was it? Maren Morris or something like that.
Yeah.
She was kind of a star in country music, and she said, fuck it, I'm not doing it anymore because I don't like the culture of what I'm experiencing in country music. Presumably it's more conservative, maybe Trump-la-fuck, whatever it is. And a young, more sensitive girl just doesn't feel comfortable in that situation. Do you ever sense that when you're playing or see other people play, you know, like say you play a sweet, sad song that might be more liberal sounding. Do you ever get responses from the other side saying, you're a libtard, you freak, you long-haired hippie, you're playing that pussy shit? You ever get that kind of stuff?
Yeah. I mean, maybe not quite as directly as that. Some people have a little more couth, at least the shows I've played. But I've certainly had friends that had that, you know, like, you know, people that played in punk bands and hip hop groups that are a little more, you know, fringe, that it rubs people the wrong way, and boy, they'll let you know it, you know. I think my music is kind of intended towards more of like interpersonal stuff than political stuff. But every once in a while, the political gets in there. You know, sometimes it's hard. You know, you live in the world with your eyes open. It's hard for it not to, you know, filter in a little bit.
Well, what do you think? How do you think? There's a song in the 70s, and I think back to it, and being at a park dance and dancing with a girl when this music is playing. And you didn't think about it
Yeah.
at the time because the era was different. But when I think back, I go, wow, that was wildly inappropriate. And you're probably trying to guess what song I'm thinking. I bet you don't guess it. The song was Having My Baby by Paul Anka. You ever remember the song? You're having
Oh
my
yeah,
baby.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
You could have
Yeah,
swept it away,
right.
but wildly
Yeah,
inappropriate for 13-year-old kids to be playing, to be dancing to. It was just fucking crazy. But
right, exactly.
But the the music industry is a weird one because some people would look at it as political, and certainly there are artists that are political one side or the other. Country is known for a more conservative or Republican bent, and of course rock and roll and whatever the genres are now, they're more liberal. And it's ironic to me that there would be that separation, because when it comes to music, it's just about what sounds good to you. And the lyrics
Sure.
were always second. I love lyrics. I love songs with stories. But as I've gotten older, I look back at songs I really liked and I realized I had no idea what they were fucking saying. It didn't matter. I could make the sounds with the song, but I didn't know the words. How important do you
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that
yeah,
is
yeah.
in delivering your music?
For me, I almost always heard lyrics first, so I usually had a pretty good idea of what they're saying. But there's always that thing in rock and roll where there's some stuff that's totally unintelligible, and you're just like,
Right.
yeah, I'm just guessing. And then when you actually see the readout of what it is, you're like, oh my god, that's what it's about. Just thought it was some clever words that went together, and maybe not. And especially when you're younger, pick up on metaphor and dual
Right.
meanings and stuff that some stuff is a little trashier than maybe you would have guessed at first glance. But yeah, there's certainly that. What has been interesting is we watch a lot of TV shows with the closed captioning on,
Right.
and so they'll have music in the background, and then sometimes the lyrics will be scrolling. I'm like, boy,
Wow.
I've heard that song 2,000 times, and I never knew those were the words.
Right.
It's kind of eye opening.
Well, and the thing is, in some of these songs too, there's words that aren't words. They're just sounds or made up words. I was watching an interview
Right.
with Steve Miller, who was big when I was in high school, late 70s. Fly Like an Eagle, Jet Airliner. The classic was The Joker. And in that song, he references the pompatus of love. Now, nobody knew what that word was,
Right.
pompatus. Somebody finally asked him. He goes, I don't
Yeah.
fucking know. I heard it in some R&B song, and they asked him, and they said, I just made that word up. It's crazy. But everybody who hears
Serious?
that song
Yeah, I was
sings
always wondering
those
about
words.
that.
Yeah, it's not a word. It's nothing.
Right. Yeah, right.
It's
Right. There is that where sometimes it's just to fill space. Like I saw this interview with Paul Simon one time, and he was just talking about his songwriting process and just how there were some measures that had 16 beats and there are other measures that had 8, and he was just trying to fill them in,
right.
like a city worker filling in holes on the road. He's just like, I just have to put words there, and then sometimes they mean something, sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's just a filler, and sometimes it has a greater meaning, or sometimes it means something beyond the song. I thought that was interesting, that it was very much a kind of a construction worker way of doing song. It wasn't like, yes, this meant so much to me, and he's like, yeah, I had lines in there that were meaningful, and then there are other things that were totally toss-offs that didn't mean much of anything at all, but people would start attaching meaning to it. And oh, this really means, and he's like, it didn't really mean much of anything, but I'm glad you saw something in it that you could relate to.
It's almost like abstract art. Oh, there's an open white spot. I'm going to make a red slash there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all it's all just art, and
right.
It's there for people to perceive any way they perceive it.
Right. Well, it's interesting. Dovetailing back to what you were saying about Maren Morrison kind of getting out of the country scene. I saw that back with during the George W. thing and the Dixie Chicks, that
Right.
whole controversy, that all these country stations were throwing them out. Oh my God, they're so terrible. But there was a whole adult contemporary rock stations, all those started picking their music up and saying, okay, you're rejected by this whole audience. We actually like you because of it. And
Right.
I don't think in any small part it was, yeah, they write some solid songs, but I think part of it was, oh, that side hates you that much. Well, we kind of like you then, now we'll
Right.
give your music a chance.
Right.
And
Because
I
they
mean,
were,
same with one of the biggest artists in the world right now, Taylor Swift, started off as country, and it's kind of broadened into folk and pop and all those other things. But she started off as primarily a country artist, And I
right.
think
Exactly.
it seems like her politics definitely don't align with what they're doing, and she's been very outspoken about getting her demographic to register to vote, and it's definitely not for the Republicans of Tennessee.
No, absolutely. And the thing about it is that I've got a daughter-in-law and some nieces and stuff that love Taylor Swift. I can't say I'm a Taylor Swift fan, but I'm 63 years old. There's some songs she does I like Shake It Off or whatever. They're catchy,
Right.
but I have a lot of respect for her.
Yeah.
I was watching
Yeah.
a documentary, and she wanted to speak out about some political thing regarding Trump. And her old
Right.
white managers say, no, you can't do that. It'll cost us money. It'll do this. She says, fuck it. I'm doing it. I
Right.
feel strongly about this. I'm
Yeah.
doing that. And if we had more people in this country, especially in the position of Taylor Swift, we'd be a lot better off. I don't know if
Yeah.
the Republicans understand how big a force she could be if she kicks it into gear as we get close to this
Absolutely.
election. If it looks like there's going to be trouble
Yeah.
on the Democratic side and she feels inspired, she could change the world, because the millennials and the Gen Zs play a big role in the 2024 election and the 2028 election. There is no Pied Piper in the Democrats or the Republicans like Taylor Swift. She's got a huge and loyal audience, and they'll do whatever she says. So I have a lot of respect for her to be.
My God, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, just seeing the numbers that she did last weekend with a concert film that almost grossed $100 million in this country, and without the backing of a studio,
right,
independently financed, and went around the whole studio system. I mean, she's a force to be reckoned with.
She is. And I heard somebody talking about that. Normally you take it to HBO and they do it and you get pennies on the dollar, but she's got so much money. She says, fuck it. I'll buy the cameras. I'll do whatever. I'll hire the people. We'll just do it ourselves and we'll put it out and we'll make money. Right. I mean, it's always been in the music industry that a talent or a band would come to them and say, I want to put out a record, and they had the best studios and the video capabilities and the promotion and the distribution. Right. A lot of people can do that now with the internet. You can distribute your own shit.
Right.
You can, I mean, even dumb old white guy me doing TikToks. I get millions of views every month for what?
Yeah.
I don't really show any talent. I just talk shit. So if you're a truly talented artist and you're on TikTok, you can get exposed to millions and millions of people. You put it on iTunes. I've seen it before where some kid will come out and play a song and he's talented or she's talented, and they'll say you can get it on iTunes. And then 2 months later they come back, my song's #1 on iTunes, and they never heard of the motherfucker. That's incredible.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's incredibly freeing too.
It's totally changed the game.
Right. Well, it's a fuck you to the establishment music industry and with Taylor Swift, the movie industry. And it's about time. They need to be accountable for their shit. They've been able to run rogue for a long fucking time and take advantage of a lot of people. So I don't feel sorry for them a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you're seeing it too. I do some acting work as well. And I've done plays and commercials and worked in film and TV, and with the actors strike, and you have on one hand all these studios saying, we can't afford to give you residuals for our streaming services and stuff, but on the other hand, posting these record profits. Just a couple of days ago, Netflix came out and said over the last quarter they added 9 million new subscribers. They had a $13 billion profit. I mean, like,
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can't pay the actors a little bit more. You can't give them health benefits. You can't give them 2% of what you're making for streaming. There's all kinds of shows that are wildly successful on the streaming service, and they're not getting a penny because the format is completely different. When we were growing up, if there was reruns of a TV show, would be on your local CBS or NBC, and they have commercials in there, and of course, they would make residuals for the reruns. Now it's
Right.
all on these streaming services where they don't make anything. They're not making even pennies.
And you would think it would be easier to track how many people are watching something. Back
Right.
in the old days, they had everybody with the diaries. Yeah, I watched channel 11. I watched channel 4 through this time. Now it's all on
Yeah,
fucking
yeah.
computer. You can see how many times
Right.
your song was streamed on iTunes to the penny.
Yeah.
So don't tell me it's
Yeah.
harder. It's way easier now. Well, you said you
Well,
did some acting.
yeah. I've done done some plays around town with the Urban Spectrum Theater, and yeah, I've done commercial stuff and done some background work. I got to work on last year. I worked on Billions and Succession,
Really?
Showtime and HBO respectively, and Winning Time, and worked on Chicago PD, Chicago Fire. Yeah, so
Really?
also a fun sideline, and I love the minutia of it. Sometimes people are really bored of like long wait times of setting up a shot and stuff. I find it fascinating. I like watching all the little things that go into making television and film. It's really interesting. You start with a wide shot and go to your middle shots, and they shoot all the close-ups. Then they flip it around and do it from the other side and get the other angle of the conversation. And it's really fascinating. I got to do a couple days, not this last summer, but the summer before, on this film called Marmalade that was shooting around town with Joe Keery from Stranger Things, and Aldous Hodge from City on a Hill. And I got to do 2 days as an inmate at the Stillwater prison.
Wow.
And that was absolutely fascinating. That offer came over, and I was like, yeah, absolutely. Go spend a couple days working in a max security prison. That sounds fascinating. You don't turn that down, at least for the stories,
Right.
And
Exactly.
really cool crew. Really, really neat experience. I had one day that I was out having lunch while we were shooting, and you're out in your orange jumpsuits, and I started talking to this guy, and having a really good conversation. I'm finally like, well, what do you do? And he's like, I'm the warden. I'm like, oh, no kidding. We talked for another like 10, 15 minutes. He's like, did you think about working here? I'm like, absolutely not, but I appreciate the offer. And I'm like, it's really interesting line of work. And, talked to another guy about how they almost had an escape at the prison, and they had got 4 guys had tunneled under the prison and almost got out, and the 3 of the guys had cut one of the other guys out, and the 4th guy ratted him out, and they caught him within feet of escaping. I was like, man, where are you going to hear those kind of stories? It was
now
really, really cool.
in that kind of TV movie work, whether you're being an extra or I don't know what you call that, is that a profitable part of the business? I mean, can you make decent money doing that?
It depends. I mean, a lot of it, the money is made. You're not making a ton for an hourly wage. You're making something, but a lot of it is when it goes into bonus time, like beyond 8 hours, beyond 10. Like I worked on that Showtime show Billions. I worked on there, and that was 16 hours or something. But I was endlessly fascinated by the conversations that you have with people that work on the shows and stuff. So that I love that. So suddenly you go time and a half, and you're going double time, and they were like, oh, sorry guys, sorry we're running long. I'm like, I'm absolutely happy just sitting here and eating free food, having free drinks, and waiting for the next shot to come around, because the money's good and so is the food. So I'm totally cool with it.
So you have to fly all over the country to do this sort of thing. I mean, Billions isn't.
Yeah, but with like LA and New York and Chicago, I have friends that live there, so that takes out a huge expense. Yeah. If I was having to put myself up at hotels or something, it's definitely not worth that. But
well, the experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to work on they did 2 seasons on HBO of the show Winning Time. And I got to work on there in January, and work on episodes 6 and 7. And I got to be a rowdy Celtics fan, which worked for me because I am a Celtics fan. So I just scream myself hoarse the first day. I just, I got to cheer for all these guys I loved as a kid, from the mid '80s Celtics, and,
Right.
Robert Parrish and Larry Bird, and all that. It was just a total blast, and cool being on a place that had so much history. Just being on the Warner Brothers lot, it's just you can feel. I mean, I'm not super into like the supernatural or anything like that, but you could feel like spirits in some of these stages. Where I had breakfast one day, they had shot Casablanca and Arsenic and Old Lace and Cool Hand Luke. I mean, it's just all like so much history in these places, and you can just look around and go, it probably hasn't changed all that much from when they were filming. I mean, it's just not a lot to it, just a basic stage, but it's so cool. I just really enjoyed that experience. And I had read about how certain, I think it was a couple of years prior, I'd read this Vanity Fair article about how certain stages are directors will feel are cursed because they put out a bomb movie there. Like a movie bombed, and they're like, oh, we don't want to go to stage 11. That's the cursed stage. And so, like I was looking at this one stage, and it was all these, movies through the 30s and 40s and 50s, and they have all of them, kind of written on these walls where, all these great productions, and there was, all these great movies throughout the ages. Then it got to 97 and had Batman and Robin, and it just stopped. And I'm like, wow, that really, they really thought that was, that was a bomb. But I was like, boy, it was really a bomb to those directors. Like, no, we don't want any part of that Batman and Robin energy.
I can kind of relate to what you're saying, because when I was doing the stuff in the music business, I said I went to pitch an artist to an exec at A&M Records. Now, the interesting thing about A&M Records, it's Herb Alpert, and I don't know who the other guys, they've sold it since.
Yeah.
But it was a top level label at the time. But where their offices and studios are the old Charlie Chaplin film studios or film lot.
Oh, yeah.
And this hadn't changed at all. It was still, it was a record company now, but it was just, I didn't even really give a shit about A&M Records. I was intrigued by walking around and seeing that, 80 years ago, the first attempts at movies were right here. That's fucking crazy.
Yeah. I love that kind of history stuff. I'm a big fan. That's so cool. When I had a audition about 8 or 9 years ago, I had an audition where they flew me out to LA for a TV series that they were filming out of Sweden. And I got pretty far in the process because they flew me out and put me up at a hotel, and it was a nice deal. But I felt so cool where like that round of the audition was near the Capitol Records building, and to be that close, it was like across the street. That's just so, it just, with all the great albums that have come out of there, the history of that, I just thought it was so cool. I just couldn't get over it. Like, this is where I get to, try my hand at something today, is, right outside of Capitol Records.
Right. And, over and above what went on inside that iconic picture of Capitol Records, the round building, it's
right.
When I've been to Los Angeles, I've seen it, and it's always taken me aback because you've seen it in movies and television shows. It's always in the forefront of a lot of things. And it's those kind of things that do make you stop and go, whoa, that fucking thing really does exist. It's not just on TV.
Yeah. Absolutely.
As somebody who's a musician and is doing acting in Hollywood or Chicago, what have you, why are you still based in Minnesota? Why have you stayed here?
I think the cold weather keeps out the riffraff. I like the Midwest, at least for now. I think at some point we're gonna live overseas. My girl's from Germany, and I think she would like to move back there at some point. And I'd like more of a European adventure. Every time I go to Europe, I feel a little more close to the European experience. I want to kind of see what that's all about. And I think that'll influence me musically in some interesting ways, just really pick up stuff and totally transplant myself in a place where I'm not overly comfortable, but enough people speak English that it won't be a complete shock to the system. So
it'll be a total different thing, though. I mean, you're not going to be running off to LA for movie roles or going into local pubs playing the blues. I wouldn't think, not in Germany.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, there's interesting. It's interesting. Like in like Hamburg is a really good like rock and roll and blues town. So
Really?
there are places that really gravitate towards American music and that kind of thing. I think we would probably like to go to Berlin because it's more of an international city. You hear so many different languages. It reminds me a lot of New York, where it's just so many different languages being spoken on those streets. And yeah, it's we really dig just the vibe of Berlin. It's really got a cool vibe.
I have not yet been to Europe, but I'm hoping to do that this year, and I'm looking forward to it. Maybe you could play the Cavern, the Beatles' old
Oh,
venue.
that'd be awesome.
I
Yeah,
don't,
absolutely,
I don't even
absolutely.
know if
Well,
that's still
I'm a
there.
huge Beatles fan, so anything Beatles related is cool by me. I went to and I stayed in London in 2006 and got to cross Abbey Road, and that was cool. And what people don't know about Abbey Road is the traffic never stops for people taking pictures. It's going all the time. They're like, "Fuck
Really?
you, we're going." So you better get your picture in. If you want a picture crossing Abbey Road, you better get it in, get it in quick, because they don't care. They're like, "Ah, oh, fucking tourists."
Well, it's funny when I was in the music business and I had a studio in a building, which is where Target Center is right now, but it was kitty corner from First Avenue. So the
Oh,
movie
sure.
Purple Rain was filmed pretty much in front of my building. I saw a lot of it being filmed.
Yeah.
And after it was filmed and
Nice.
after it was out and popular, it was funny. I would go down, maybe go to lunch or go someplace else from my building. Every day, all day,
Right.
there'd be some tourist standing on my corner taking a shot of First Avenue because they thought of it as iconic
Oh yeah.
and they wanted to take the shots. People really dig going to those places where it's been made famous someplace like Abbey Road or
Yeah.
or First Avenue or what have you. It's
Yeah. Absolutely.
and I understand the intrigue to it because I'm kind of a history nerd too. When I can go someplace and
Mm-hmm.
see something that is of a different era, like when we go to Boston, I love Boston because it's so historical. We have a place in Savannah,
Right.
Georgia, very historical, and that's a
Oh,
great
nice.
thing. I'm sorry.
I said nice.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I like the traveling too. I would just wish I had some other talent other than this to make it a reason to travel. Now I just do it for the fuck of it. Um, so as we're
Yeah. Yeah.
come close to the end of the show, let's kind of revert back to politics, basically to get your sense or your view on this. Obviously, we've gone through a tumultuous time. You've had to deal with
Right.
it. However, you had to deal with it as a musician and an actor. I've dealt with it by screaming about it on the internet. But things seem to have the tide seems to have shifted more to the right side to sanity as opposed to the insanity. Well, in your mind, what
Right.
do you feel is going to happen over the next year leading up to the election?
I think you see a deterioration of the mental faculties of Trump for one.
Yeah,
I mean, every day
absolutely.
it's more slurring, more outrageous outbursts. I really hope he's held to some sort of equal regard. Like there's so much that, oh, I'm not getting fair treatment. You're getting more than fair treatment. You're
Yeah,
getting they're bending over backwards to keep you out of jail. It's
right.
like it's so preposterous. But I think there are so many voters and so many friends I've talked to that are still so pissed off about taking away women's reproductive care.
Right.
I think that's going to be another thing that's going to push so many young voters to the polls. And now you see it in some of these. I can't. Sorry, I don't remember the congressman's name out of Florida, but he's putting forth policies to get rid of birth control and like
Right.
all these things that we had said a few years ago of, oh, that's outrageous. They won't take away Roe v. Wade and they won't take away birth control. And now they're people putting up those kind of policies. I think all they're doing is shooting themselves in the foot, especially with younger voters that are going, absolutely not. You're not taking away rights that they grew up with and were born with. I think
Right.
that's going to make a huge difference in turnout.
Well, doesn't it seem amazing that overturning Roe v. Wade cost them the 2022 election? If anybody has any common sense, we go, we should back off that, but instead they embrace it. It's like if one day
Right.
if you went to do a
Double
show
down.
and you played a couple polkas and they go, what the fuck is that? Don't play that polka shit. And so the next set is all polkas. That makes no sense. Why would anybody with any intelligence do that shit?
Right. Yeah, it seems preposterous. And the you waiting for saner heads to prevail. You're hoping that somebody will speak up. But it's just shown the spinelessness of the Republicans, of not having some of their moderates go, this isn't where we should be taking the party, regardless of Trump might say something mean to me online. Fucking stand up for something that you at least formally believed,
Yeah. They're too worried about owning the libtards or holding the liberals back. They're too busy doing that to even come up with something productive on their own. Of course, we've got the thing with the Speaker of the House. They tried Steve Scalise, didn't work. Jim Jordan 3 times, didn't work. Now they're still sitting there. We're going on 3 weeks without a Speaker of the House. Nothing is getting done. And they just want to keep trying shit that they know is not going to work. And it's all because they're unwilling to work with the Democrats. As much as they have the majority, they're divided, so they're not really a majority. They're going to have to work with the Democrats at some point because the Democrats are unified. 17 votes for Speaker of the House since McCarthy started to what went on this past week. 17 votes, and all 17 votes, Hakeem Jeffries received 212 votes, which was every Democratic representative. He got more votes than either one of the candidates did. Of course, he's not Speaker of the House because you need 217, but that's the difference. They have the majority and they still can't pull it off.
Yeah, it's just comical. And the whole ethos of let's vote in a bunch of people into congressional districts, Senate, that don't believe in government. That's the thing that the Republicans have really embraced. Let's take a bunch of people that don't believe in our basic structures, our basic tenets of government, that they want to destroy it all. Okay, but then what are you for? We know you're into destroying stuff. What are you for?
Yeah.
What are your the pluses? Why should we vote for you? It used to be, I have this, and this I'd like to accomplish. All there is destroying what's already there. Okay, but that isn't a platform.
Well, it's certainly not good for their constituents. It's not good for liberals, but it's not good for their constituents. And that's what I don't understand. As we get closer to the 2024 election, they can't get anything done in the House of Representatives. They're embarrassing themselves. But like you said, I think if nothing else was going on, there were no trials, no indictments, nothing else. That one case of overturning Roe v. Wade, it was devastating to them in 2022. It's still going to be a problem in 2024, and it's going to continue to be a problem. I always tell folks, when they first did it prior to the 2022 election, the common thought was the Republicans are going, well, they'll be mad about it at first, but they'll forget about it. Have you ever been married to or dated a woman? They don't forget shit. I tell people, I say, if I have the audacity to win a fight with my wife, then she starts in 1983 when we got married and covers every sin I've committed since that time. She's going to pound me down one way or another, no matter what.
You might be forgiven, but they don't forget.
No, they never forget. And the thing about it is that, well, let me ask you this. I don't talk about it much because it's a no-win situation, but this war in Israel with Hamas, it's obviously divided a lot of people on what they think. Oh, the Israelis are bad or Hamas is bad. And Hamas is a terrorist organization. So, and they started this shit. But it's amazing to me how politicians and people in this country are so worried about it when all the shit we've got to fix here should be primary, the abortion issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
We had 1 million people die of an epidemic that was handled negligently by the Republicans, and you've got the attack on the Capitol. We got our own shit to deal with before we start worrying or talking about shit we don't know anything about in the Middle East.
Right. Well, and things that have been going on for not just years, decades, centuries. I mean, the conflict there is is as old as time. You know, yeah, I mean, it should be given consideration, but not an overly large amount, because yeah, as you say, there's a ton of issues we have to deal with here that really deserve priority.
Well, you know, the thing is, like you say, I was born in 1960. And in that time, there have been multiple wars between these factions. And always it's tragic,
Right.
and it's always difficult. And yes, America should go in there and try to settle things down and support Israel because they are our ally. Whether you like it or not, that's our job.
Right.
We side with and we support our allies. If you don't like it, well then elect somebody who has a different plan. But they are our allies, so we have to deal with it. But I've been pretty non-committal about it because I know both sides have done some pretty egregious shit. And you know, I'll get people commenting to me. They say, "Well, you'd think differently if you were Jewish." Yeah, I probably would, but I'm
Right.
not fucking Jewish, and I'm an old
Mhm.
white guy sitting in the Midwest.
Right.
Doesn't know shit about the Middle East.
Right.
Sometimes you stay out of shit.
Right.
And I'm not saying America shouldn't help.
Right.
I just think this spewing opinions
Mm.
based on knowing nothing, we've done enough of that the last 7 years.
Right. And it knowing friends in Europe and stuff, it frightens them, the stuff that filters back from the US. You know, what I would read a German newspaper and see like how even not as president, Trump would get these big headlines over there, and they're like, "Oh my God, you guys are going to elect him again." I'm like,
Yeah.
not as far as I'm concerned. Or the thing when he first got in that I'd have to answer over and over as I went across Europe is, did you vote for him? I'm like, hell no, he ain't my guy. You know, like,
Yeah.
but they think that every American falls into line there, and oh, you must support him. Oh, by God, no.
No.
I knew
No.
he was a foolish game show host from the drop.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, he's emotionally broken. He's not very bright, and he's narcissistic, so only cares about himself. Who knew that would be a problem? You know, all you had to do was talk to the motherfucker, and he knew this was not going to be a good situation.
Right.
Having dealt with people like him
Right.
before, I knew
Right.
when he first got in, I thought this isn't going to go well. But you voted for him, so get ready to deal with some shit. Um,
Right.
uh,
Do you think he legitimately thought he would win?
At first, no. No, I don't. I don't think he did it. I think he did it for what he does everything for, publicity. He was running into trouble with his brand.
Right.
He
Yeah.
needed to kick up his brand a little bit. He says, "I'll run for
Mhm.
president." And then when he got to the point where he started getting some credibility from being on TV all the time, then his ego took over and says, "I can win this motherfucker." But when he looks back on his life in his last
Right. Right.
days, the biggest mistake he'll realize he made was running for president, because he stepped into an arena where he
Right.
was a small fish that didn't know what he was fucking doing. He tried to wing it, it didn't work, and now he's in jail. He will regret that decision.
No. Your lips to God's ear.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I believe in destiny. You know, people said, "Oh, it's so terrible. We're going to have Armageddon." And I try to explain to them that if you lived in the 60s, and I was young at the time, that was pretty traumatic. That was a lot of trials and tribulations. There were 3 major assassinations in the 60s. We had the Vietnam War, we had riots, we had civil rights, we had race riots, we had women trying to get their rights. It was very tumultuous in the 60s. And if you lived in the 60s, had I been older, I might think, God, we'll never see the light of day after this. But of course we did. There's always been tumultuous times in this country. The Depression, people in depression probably thought they'd never be able to dig out from that, but of course we did. And it's the same with this thing. It's going to, you know, it's like getting socked in the arm. It hurts for a little bit, but eventually it goes away. And I think that's what's happening here.
Right.
It's starting to heal, and it's going to take a while to recover completely, but we're in the recovery process right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's the thing too. I find it comical with like a Mike Lindell. Well, I'm being canceled. I'm part of cancel culture. No, it's not cancel culture. It's consequence culture.
Right. Right. Well,
You made some stupid moves, anti-American moves, and now you're seeing the consequence of that.
uh, the cancel culture thing is always something that troubled me. Everybody would complain about cancel culture like there's something we can do about it. Cancel culture is a very simple concept. If you do fucked up shit, people will cancel you. The only way not to get canceled is to not do fucked up
Right.
shit. It's as simple as that. It's not the people that are canceling you. I have the right to feel about somebody any way I want.
Yeah.
And you can't change my mind by shaming me and say, you shouldn't be so mean to me. You should let me just do this shit and not hold me accountable. Sorry, that's not how human nature works.
Right. Right.
I mean, it's not like
absolutely.
It's not like you can call the guy who's head of the cancel culture and put some pressure on him. That we're talking about emotions and feelings and opinions. They can complain all they want, but if you do fucked up shit, you're going to get canceled. It's just
yeah, absolutely. Hard to feel too much sympathy for him. It's like no one forced you to do that. No one forced you to try to overthrow our government. You did that. That's all on you and only you. Same with Rudy Giuliani and just pissing away all that goodwill that he had from 9/11. Absolutely pissing it away in the name of power. And it's like no one forced you to do that. No one forced you to take the side of an absolute unrepentant narcissist. You did that, and now you're facing the consequences.
You know, the people who follow Donald Trump, or the Trump-lefucks, as I call them, it's almost like drug addicts hitting the rock bottom. You know, for a while they're flying high. They got all the potential in the world, but they ride that horse too long, and then they go and hit rock bottom, and they're done. I mean, you think about it. Rudy Giuliani is a good example. Mike Lindell. I get a kick out of Mike Lindell. He says, I lost my business. I was canceled. Well, who saw that coming? Fuck. I could have told him that 4 years ago. Don't do this, dumb fuck. And then when he starts losing money, you would say, oh, that's kind of scary. But he didn't even get it then. He continued to double down. And two lawyers now plead guilty in the Georgia case, and they're going to testify against him. How many people that were friends or associates of his that have lost their livelihoods just because they could not step back from it? Donald Trump is like fucking heroin. He destroys people's lives.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I can't remember who always says that, but they're like, anything Donald Trump touches dies.
Yeah, it does. It's absolutely true. And it's been proven multiple times over the years. Well, I'm going to wrap things up here. Lars, I appreciate you coming on. I always like having guests on because first of all,
it's been a blast.
Makes my job easier because I have to talk less. But I have a natural curiosity about people, regardless of who they are and what they think. Absolutely. And it's always entertaining for me. Now, and it's a nice departure. I sometimes worry because I talk about the same shit all the time, you know, different variations and different stories. But I have a risk of becoming a Johnny One Note, you know, a one-trick pony. Yeah, Mike can only talk about politics.
Sure.
I can talk about anything at great length, not necessarily of quality, but I can talk a lot about virtually anything.
Right.
Well, Lars, thanks for coming on. Next time you want to stop on, just send me an email and we'll set it up. We've done it now. You can see that it wasn't, well, you're a performer, so this wasn't going to be something made you nervous, but a lot of people get nervous doing this, and we try to make it as easy as possible.
Yeah.
All right.
It was great fun. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you. I had a good time too, and hopefully the listeners did as well. I'm sure they did. For the folks at home, thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen. Hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.